Now we're going to continue factoring trinomials which the leading coefficient is not 1 anymore. So the technique that I'm going to teach you is this. So you will have this situations, right? You will have so you're drawing it. So first you're going to multiply a times c. That's where you're going to put it. And then you're going to put your b right here. And then after that, what you're going to do is you're going to find out two number. When you multiply, that will become a times c. That will be equal to a times c. And add it up to get your b. And then finally, after you find that out, you're going to be dividing by your a on those case of 1 and case of 2, and then reduce. So those are the steps, right? And then reduce. You have to reduce that part also. So once again, your k, you're looking for two number. When you multiply k sub 1 times k sub 2, that will be equal to a times c. And when you added up k sub 1 plus k sub 2, that will be equal to b. So let's try on this first example. Okay. So in this example, and this is my a, right? This is my b, and this is my c. So when we multiply a times c, this gives me 6 times 10, which is 60. And then my b is negative 19. That's my b. Now what we want to do is we want to find out two numbers that multiply to get 60, and when you subtract it, that will become what? When you add it, not subtract, when you add it, that will become 19. Okay? So you can list it out. 1 times 60, 2 times 30, like in the previous example that I showed to you. And you should be, with the help of the calculator, we should be able to find out very quickly what numbers goes into it. So it'll be 3 times 20, 4 times 15, and then now we found out that what this will be 40. Okay? So we need to according to the sign pattern, both of them is negative, so it'll be negative 4 and negative 15, because only if it is both negative, when you add it up, that will become negative 19. Now we found out k sub 1 and k sub 2 already, so the last step that we need to do is divide by a, which my a in this case is 6. So I divide by a on both of them. And after that, we need to reduce. We have to reduce. So this will be 2 goes into 4 2 times, 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 goes into negative 15, negative 5 times. 3 goes into 6 2 times. Now finally, let's take a look at this. How we gonna write down our order pairs, factors. The factor will be always like this. The denominator will go to the front. Denominator will be the coefficient of the first term, and the numerator will be the coefficient of the second term on each factor. So this 2 is going to go right there, and negative 5 is going to go right here. So our factor will become 3i minus 2, that will be in first factor, and then 2i minus 5. And this will be our final answer. You can always check by foiling, right? 3i times 2i will give me 6i squared, and then 3i times negative 5 will be negative 15i. Negative 2 times 2i will be negative 4i. Negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10, so it will be 6i minus 19i plus 10, which is the original one that we get. So this is checking. You don't need to check. Once you get this hang to it, you don't need to check. You will be always correct. Okay? So now let's use the same thing for the next problem, and then hopefully we get better and then faster on this. So now in this case we know that this is our A and this is our B and this is our C. So drawing this sphere, right, by A times C, that will be 8 times negative 3 is negative 24, and negative 10 is my B. Now I need to find out the two number, right, that multiply to be 24 and then added up to become negative 10. So negative 24, so it has to be one positive and one negative, and we need to add it up to get what? 10. Negative 10. So I will be using negative 12 and 2, right? Because negative 12 times 2 will give me negative 24. When you add it up, negative 12 plus 2 will give me 10. Now what we do is we divide by A, which is 8, and then after that you reduce, right? After that you reduce. So when I reduce this, what happened? Okay, so after reduce it by A, after divided by A, now we're gonna reduce. So 4 goes into 12, negative 12, negative 3 times, 4 goes into 8 2 times, 2 goes into 2 1 time, and 2 goes into 8 4 times. Now, according to the rule, my factor, right, will be something like this. The denominator will be the coefficient of the first term, and the numerator will be coefficient of the second term. Coefficient of first term, coefficient of the second term. So my factor in this case will be 2j minus 3 times with 4j plus 1. And that will be my final answer in this case. So let's practice more on this trinomial. Right? So the next one, now I'm going to be using less color, okay, so that way we can move faster. So make sure you follow me. So for this one, my A times C, right? My A times C is 10 times 3, which is going to be 30, positive 30. And we want our B, which is 17. Now we need to think about two number which will multiply to become 30, but when we add it up, it will be 17. And right away, I know that it must be what? 15 and 2. Right? 15 times 2 is 30, and 15 plus 2 is 17. Now, you can write 2 in the front and 15 at the back, doesn't really matter. It will be the same thing at the end. So now, next will be we need to divide it by our A, which is 10. And then reduce it. Right? You have to reduce it, otherwise it will not be factored completely. So 5 goes into 15 3 times, 5 goes into 10 2 times, 2 goes into 1 time, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. Now our factor will become, the denominator is the coefficient of the first term, the numerator is coefficient of the second term. So like this. So my final answer will become 2k plus 3 and then 5k plus 1. And this will be my final answer. So hopefully you got a hang to it already at this point, right? 3 examples already. So let's move on to more so that we will get better. So next one. So a times c, which is 6 times negative 5, that will be negative 30. And we want to have what? b, which is positive 13. Now, two number multiplied to be negative 30, that means I need to have a one positive number and one negative number, right? And then when we add it up, it should be 13. So clearly that must be a positive 15 and negative 2. That will give me negative 30, but when we add it up, it will give us what? A positive 13. So that's how we decide like which one will be negative and which one will be positive also. And then we divide it by a, which is 6, and then reduce. 3 goes into 15 5 times, 3 goes into 6 2 times, 2 goes into 2 1 time, and then 2 goes into 6 3 times. So according to the rule, right? So then denominator will be the coefficient of the first term, numerator will be coefficient of the second term in each factor. So now my factor will become 2l plus 5, okay? And then 3l minus 1, and this will be my final answer. You may always FOIL it to check you got the right answer, you got the right factoring or not. Okay, so continuing on the next one. So in this case, we don't have the greatest common factor, so I'm gonna try to find out my a, and then c, which is a times c, 10 times 6, 60, and we are interested in getting my b, which is positive 19, and we need to multiply two numbers together to get 60 and then add it up to be 19. So I can multiply two negative number or two positive number to get 60, but it must be two positive number because when we add it up, it should be positive 19. So now that must be what? 15 and 4, because 15 times 4 is 60, 15 plus 4 is 19. And then we divide by 10. So this gives me 5 goes into 3 times, 5 goes into 2 times, 4 goes in, 5 goes in, 2 goes into 4 2 times, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. And then my factor, the denominator will be the first coefficient, the numerator will be the second coefficient of the second term, right? The numerator, like this. So this will become, my answer is 2m plus 3, and then 5m plus 2. And this will be my final answer. If you have a multivariable, the same thing, except the second term now you have what? Another variable involved. So similarly, like in previous examples, we're going to try to do this. 6 times negative 5, that will be negative 30. And we are interested in getting the middle term positive 7. So which two number multiply to be negative 30 and added up to be 7? That's what we are thinking. Okay? And it must be one positive and one negative number in order to get negative 30 when we multiply it. And then the positive number must be bigger because when we add it up, it should be positive 7. So that gives us positive 10 and negative 3. Now we're going to divide it by a, which is 6. So 2 goes into 5, 10 5 times, 2 goes into 6 3 times, 3 goes into 3 1 times, and then 3 goes into 6 2 times. So according to the rule, the denominator will become coefficient of the first term, and the numerator will become coefficient of the second term in each factor. So my answer will become 3n plus 5p, and then 2n minus 1p, and this will be my final answer. So when you have a variable at the end, all you have to do is what? Just put that variable everything is the same thing. So continuing this, 12, 19, 21, there's no greatest common factor, so I will try to factor it out. A times A times C. So this will be the type of problem that you will have difficulties because the number is very large, and then you need to use your calculator help to do it faster. Okay, so my A is 12 times with my C is 21, which is negative 252, and what we want is negative 19. So in order to get negative 252, we're going to be multiplying one positive number and one negative number. But however, the positive number has to be smaller, so when we added up the numbers together, that would become a negative. Now, you will not be listing it out like before, 1 times 252, 2 times 126, so on and so forth like this. Because we know that when we add it up, we have to subtract together because one positive and one negative sign. And notice that 2 and 126 is very far apart. So you want to find out some closer number that give you 252 and then continue. Okay. So we know that 15 times 15 is 225. And definitely 15 is not going to go into it. So we're going to try to start with 252. 16 is not going to, 16 is not, so 15 times 15 is too close already, so we're gonna have to go a little bit further down. So let's say 252 divided by 13. That's try and error. Okay, we are doing try and error right now because otherwise it won't work. If you list it out, it will be tons of them to list out. So 13 doesn't go into it, so next 252 I'm gonna divide it by 9 to see what's happened. And then 9, it does work. That'll give me what? 9 times 28 is 252. And then you can see that 28 take away 9 will give me 19 also. So therefore, it will be negative 28 times 9. So I basically start from something that is close in the middle and then adjust it so that get the number smaller and smaller to make it a lot faster on this case. So this doesn't work. Right? This work now, so we're gonna have to divide it by the A, which is 12, and then reduce it. So 2 goes into 2 goes into 4 goes into 28 7 times. 4 goes into 12 3 times. 3 goes into 9 3 times, and 3 goes into 12 4 times. And then according to the rule, now we have what? The denominator is the coefficient of first term. Numerator is coefficient of the second term in each factor. So that gives us, which is 3q minus 7r, and then 4q plus 3r as our final answer. So this type of problem, this is the drawback of this technique, okay? But if with the help of your calculator, I believe that you can do faster. Okay? Because calculator will help you to divide and then check quickly which number works. And I already taught you how to do the trial and error, right? Start from the middle and then try to adjust it down a little bit. So next problem N, as you can see, this is not in quadratic format. The degree of the variable is 3. But however, we still can factor because I can see that s is in every single term. So remember, whenever you factoring, you have to always consider the greatest common factor. So in this case, my greatest common factor is 3s. So that will become s squared plus 4s minus 5. And that makes it a lot easier to continue, which is going to become what? Factoring out this will be s plus 5 and s minus 1, because 5 only have 1 and 5. So now I'm continuing this. Similarly, example O, the greatest common factor is 5t. So I factor out 5t, so it'll be left with t squared minus 8t plus 12. Now, factoring this 5t, so t, and this will be, both of them is in a negative factor according to the sign pattern. That will be 2 and 6. That will be my final answer. Whenever we factor in trinomial, we want our leading coefficient to be positive. So in this case, I will factor out a negative 1. So this will left with 2u squared plus 5u minus 12. Now we're going to use the technique that we learned to factor this out, because the leading coefficient is not 1 anymore. So a times c, 2 times negative 12 will be negative 24, and we want to get positive 5. So which two number multiply to give me negative 24 and added it up to be 5? That will be positive 8 and negative 3. And then we divide by 2. And we reduce it. 2 goes into 1 time and 2 goes into 8 4 times. And then this second fractions at the back cannot reduce. So therefore, my final answer will be, as usual, the denominator go to the become coefficient of the first term, and then numerator become coefficient of the second term in each factor. So my answer will become u plus 4, and then 2u minus 3. And this will be my final answer. Continuing, next example. So example Q, notice that this is not in descending power. So we always want to, if you see a trinomial, always want to put it into descending power so that you can clearly check that this is in ax squared plus bx plus c format or not. Right? So we're going to put it into descending power, which is negative 8v squared plus 22v minus 15. And clearly I need to factor negative 1 out. So when I factor negative 1 out, so it will be negative time 8v squared minus 22v plus 15. And now we're going to use the technique that we just learned to factor this out, right here. So I want to multiply a and c, right, which is 8 times 15. That give me 120. And I want to get my b, which is negative 22. So this is a big number like we mentioned earlier, but however, it's very neat in this case because 120 is basically 10 times 12, and then 10 plus 12 is 22. So we get a very nice number that we don't need to really use go around and figure it out. So this will become negative 10 and then negative 12, and then we're going to divide it by a, which is 8. And reducing this, 2 goes into 8 4 times, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. 2 goes into 8 4 times, and this one I can reduce it by 4. So 4 goes into 8 2 times, and then 4 goes into 12 3 times. So we got 4v minus 5. Remember, the denominator is the coefficient of the first term, and the numerator is the coefficient of the second term in each factor. So that's how I got 4v minus 5, and then 2v minus 3. That's how I got my final answer. Now, continue on the example R. Example R, we have the least GCF, the greatest common factor, which in this case is 2w. So we factor 2w out. That will become 2w squared plus w minus 3. So this will become 2w And for those who like to do mental math, this should be very easy one. But otherwise, you can always use this, right? A times c is negative 6. We want positive 1, so it must be positive 3 and negative 2. And we divide by a, which is 2. So this reduced to 1 and 1. So I got my factor 2w plus 3, and then 1w minus 1. And that will be my final answer in this case. So S, I can see that there is a greatest common factor, 3x. So factor 3x out, that will become 4x squared plus 11x minus 3. And using the technique, we're going to try to factor this, because if it is factorable, this technique will work, right? So in this case, my a times c, 4 times negative 12, negative 3 is negative 12, and we want positive 11 my b. So clearly this must be positive 12 and negative 1, so that when you add it up, it will become 11. Then we need to divide by 4. So when I reduce the first fractions, it will be 1 and 3. And the second fraction, I cannot reduce anymore. So therefore, my final answer will be x plus 3 and then 4x minus 1, because the denominator is the coefficient of the first term and numerator is coefficient of the second term in each factor. So from example T and on is a new technique that we're going to learn how to factor. Okay, these type of problems are called quadratic in form, meaning you can rewrite it into ax squared plus bx plus c format. And how do we determine that? Take a look at on the problem. Notice that in the first term I have y plus 5 squared, and in the second term I have y plus 5 to the first power. So that's basically sort of talking about, like, x squared and an x format, first term and second term. So to make it easier for us to factor, what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this original expression into the quadratic format. So that's why we call these type of problem quadratic in form. Some textbook is say that reducible to quadratic form. So the way that we're going to do is rewrite it so that easier to factor. So I'm going to say that let u be equal to this middle term, y plus 5. So with this, now it will become, my original problem become 8 times, instead of 5, y plus 5, that y plus 5 will be replaced by u, and then square it. Minus 2 times, and y plus 5 will be replaced by u, and then minus 3. Now this look like something that we familiar how to factor. It's basically rewriting so that it will be easier to see it and then factor. So now you're going to use the same technique that we've been doing for several examples. Oops. So this will become my a times c. My a is 8, my c is 3. So 8 times 3 is negative 24. And we want negative 2. Right. And the only way that we can multiply to get negative 24 and then add it up to get negative 2 is negative 6 times 4. And then we divide it by a, which is 8. And reduce it, that will give me 2 goes into 6 3 times, 2 goes into 8 4 times, 4 goes into 4 1 time, 4 goes into 8 2 times. So which we get 4u minus 3 and then 2u plus 1. Now this is not our final answer, because originally the question is with the variable y, so I have to replace or substitute back all the u with y plus 5, where we started off right here, right? So now my answer will become 4 times u plus 5 minus 3, and then 2 times y plus 5 plus 1. And then finally, to finish up my answer, distributing 4, that will become 4y. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 minus 3 is 17. And 2 times y is 2y. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 1 is 11. And then this will be my final answer. So you basically distribute it and then simplify it to get the final answer. So this technique is very useful later on when we solve the reducible quadratic equations. Okay, so pause it and then try to do this example u and then see we got the same answer or not. So in this case, what we can notice is the first term z plus 2 squared and then z plus 2 on the second term. So that's basically look like ax squared plus bx plus c term. So therefore, I can say that let u be equal to z plus 2. And of course, you can use any variable that you want. Not necessarily have to be u is representing that. So this will become 3 times u to the second power minus 11 times u, right? Replacing z plus 2 with u, and then minus 4. Now we're going to try to factor it out like we did before. So my a times c, 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. We want negative 11 for b. So two number multiply to get negative 12, added up to get negative 11, that must be negative 12 and 1. And we need to divide it by a, which is 3. So 3 goes into 1 time, 3 goes into 12 4 times. So my answer for factor will become u minus 4 and then 3u plus 1 from each factor. So now, putting back together, my u is basically represented by z plus 2, so it'll be z plus 2, right, minus 4, and then 3 times z plus 2, right, 3 times z plus 2, and then plus 1. So now when we simplify it, this will become, taking out the parenthesis, it will be 2 minus 4 will be negative 2. Distributing 3 will become 3z. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 will be 7, and that will be my final answer. So similarly, for example v, this time we will be looking at what? A to the 4th power and a to the 2nd power. So we know that a to the 4th power, that is equal to what? A to the 2nd power to the 2nd power. So this will look like, when we rewrite it, it will be 6 a to the 2nd power to the 2nd power plus minus 13 a to the 2nd power plus 5. So once again, we get into this format, right? These x squared, and this is what? My x situations. So I'm going to let u be equal to a to the 2nd power. So this will become, look like 6 times my a squared will be replaced by u, and then square it, that's my first term, and then minus 13, my a squared will be replaced by u, and then plus 5. So using the strategy to, again, technique to factor, 6 times 5, a times c, which is 6 times 5 is 30, and we want b negative 13. So in this case, we need to add, multiply to get positive 30 and then add to get 13. It must be negative 10 and negative 3. So divided by 6, divided by 6. So 2 goes into 6 3 times, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. 3 goes into 3 1 time, and 3 goes into 6 2 times. So my factor will become 3u minus 5 and then 2u minus 1. Now we're gonna re-substitute back with my u and then a squared. So this will become 3 times a squared minus 5 and 2 times, right? We're substituting u with a squared and then minus 1. Where do I get a squared? Right here, right? You originally did that. So now we are on the last two example on these. So hopefully you are getting a hang to it. So finally, again, similarly, we can see that b to the fourth power, that can be rewritten as what, b squared to the second power. So this will become 6b to the second power plus 11b to the second power plus 3. So I can let u be equal to b squared, so that I can substitute this part with b and then this part with u, and then the first part with u also. So this will look like 6 replacing b squared with u, which was going to be u to the second power plus 11 times b squared with u, so it should be 11u, and then finally plus 3. Now factor this out. 6 times 3, a times c, right? 6 times 3 is 18, and we want to get 11. So two numbers multiplied to be 18 and then added up to be 11 must be 9 and 2. And then we divide by a, which is 6. Reducing it, 3 goes into 9 3 times, 3 goes into 6 2 times, 2 goes into 2 1 time, 2 goes into 6 3 times. So my factor will be 2u plus 3 and then 3u plus 1. Now finally substituting back with u with b squared right here, right? So it'll be 2 times b squared and then plus 3 and then 3 times b squared plus 1. And that would be my final answer. So if you get used to with this, now you should be able to see what is the way that we're going to be checking for these type of problem. Always, if you look at it, the degree of the first term is double of the exponent of the first term is always double of the second term. Take a look at it right here. Exponent of the first term is y plus 5 to the second power. Exponent of the second term is y plus 5 to the first power. So notice that the first term, the exponent of the first term is twice the second term. Similarly right here, 4 and 2. Right? And right here, again, it will be 4 and 2. And that's how I can figure out example X can be using the same technique. 10 and 5. See, 10 is double of what? Twice of the 5. So using the same technique, now I'm going to consider c to the 10 power. That is basically talking about c to the 5th power to the second. So this will help us to write it down. 6 times c to the 5th power to the second power plus 7c to the 5th power minus 20. And now we can do the substitution. Let u be equal to c to the 5th power, which gives us 6 times u to the second power plus 7 times u minus 20. So this will give me, using the, so now we're going to use the technique to factor, which is my a times c, 6 times 20 will be negative 120, and we want b, which is going to be 7. Now, two number multiplied to become negative 120, but added up to become positive 7. So what we're going to do is we're going to use, like before, use a calculator to check it quickly, which two number will help us to get that faster. Right? So clearly 10 times 12 doesn't work in here, because when you have a positive 12 and a negative 10, that will only give you 2. So we need to get a number that is lower than 10 that we need to find out. So let's 120 divided by, let's say, 8, see what we get. So 8, and that's good because we got 8 times 15, that is 120. Right? And we want to be a positive 7, so it must be what? Positive 15 and negative 8, so that when we add it up, it will become positive 7. And now we're going to divide it by a, which is 6, and then reduce it. So 2 goes into 8 4 times, 2 goes into 6 3 times, 3 goes into 6 2 times, and 3 goes into 15 5 times. So my final answer in this case will be 3 times u minus 4 times with 2 times u plus 5. And finally, we're going to substitute back u with c to the 5th power. Right? So that will become 3 times c to the 5th power minus 4 times with 2 times c to the 5th power plus 5. And this will be my final answer, and that concludes our session.